All right, so right now I want to talk about a not just cool but deeply transformative topic. This relates to a lot of Buddhist concepts, which I will describe. So, one concept in Buddhism is called samsara. This is the wheel of suffering that, unless you're a Buddha or enlightened, that we're all stuck on. This is a cyclical path of basically dissatisfaction, this perpetual sense of something's missing, it's not enough, I need more, where is it? Dukkha, which translates to suffering. So samsara on one end, and then we have nirvana, which is the end of suffering. So one pole, we have samsara, this is the wheel of cyclical suffering. Getting your hopes up, maybe it's in this partner, in this job, in this vacation, or in this new position of power. Maybe then I'll be able to end my suffering. And nope, there's always something else. Samsara, stuck in suffering. Nirvana, the end of suffering. So these are two poles, basically. And so, knowing that most people are stuck in this wheel of samsara, um, it's kind of depressing at first. And you're like, well, I guess, how do we get out of it? And that's a question, and that's what the Buddha taught. And in my experience, it's actually pretty simple. It starts with actually allowing ourselves to feel dukkha, to be with suffering, knowing that suffering is a part of life. This is actually what the Buddha taught. This is the second noble truth out of the Four Noble Truths, which is fundamental to Buddhism. So that there is suffering. And actually, in Buddhism, dukkha, suffering, is one of the three marks of existence that is absolutely inescapable in life. There's nothing that we can actually do to avoid these things. The other two marks are impermanence and no self. So again, the three marks of existence in Buddhism, which are inescapable, any being that is existing in the terms that we know, experience suffering, impermanence, and no self. There's absolutely nothing that we can do to avoid this. So at that point, then it's like, so how do we enter nirvana? How does this happen? How do we end suffering if it's a mark of existence? It's where it gets interesting. By being with our suffering, by lowering our resistance to it, actually, by letting it be here, the experience of suffering will begin to fade. And so what Shinzen Young says, he has an equation, which is suffering is equivalent to our experience of pain multiplied by our resistance to that pain. So, if pain happens, pain's a part of life, physical pain, emotional pain, losing someone you love, it happens. But our resistance to that pain when it arises is absolutely essential, inseparable in the construction of the experience of suffering. So, if we can reduce our resistance to pain as it arises, then actually the experience of suffering will be drastically reduced. And if theoretically resistance to pain is zero, our suffering is also zero. And actually, the experience will completely fade. This sounds crazy and trippy, but you'll see this specifically in meditation, is where it's, in my opinion, easiest to see this. Um, when the mind is very still, noticing a pain in the hips, in the back, whatever. You're sitting 8 hours a day on retreat, feeling pain, and there's this like, oh, this fucking sucks, it sucks, it sucks. And this is not conscious mind, this is just a primal response to pain. I don't like this. And you resist, and that resistance increases your suffering when you're sitting for, again, 8 hours a day. And then you hit these waves where the resistance subsides, and actually so too. The suffering just bleeds out of experience. And actually the physical pain too actually reduces. Crazy, but possible. This seems very foreign if this is your first time hearing this, probably. But this is just the depth of the creative capacity of the mind to construct experience, including pain and suffering. very directly. So, again, recognizing that suffering is a mark of existence. There's nothing we can do to stop it. And in this recognition, we can let go of any attempt to stop it. Any attempt to say, oh, I'm in pain, this hurts, things are hard, I lose people I love, my job just fired me. Yeah, as is life. There will always be suffering. And so when it arises, you're like, oh, there it is. I was waiting. It's a different relationship to suffering when it arises versus, oh no, I feel like shit. I feel lack. I feel small. This is not okay. That's a certain relationship to the experience of suffering when it arises. And this relationship is based off resistance versus acceptance. If we accept suffering when it arises deeply, not just cognitively trying to accept it, but just letting it just wash over you, letting yourself marinate in dukkha. It seems counterintuitive, but when we do this, when we resist less, the experience of suffering fades. This is emotional pain, physical pain, psychological pain, depression. The more we resist it, the more it resists us. And the more it cripples us, the more we stay in this dull grayness, hopelessness, because we say this isn't okay, it lingers. Same with anxiety and awkwardness. Any sort of uncomfortable situation is actually fed by our resistance to it. Again, any sort of discomfort, suffering, dukkha, is fed by our resistance to said dukkha. When we open to it, things start to fade, become much more malleable and fluid. It's interesting. It's like the law of physics. I think it's a law of physics, which is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if I'm resisting life, if I'm resisting pain, it resists me back. And we feel it like that. It's almost like wind flowing through the mountains. You don't hear wind until it hits something, until it hits the leaves or the rock, the grass, your ears. You don't hear it until there's some resistance. So in a sense, there's no thing happening until we construct resistance for life to hit. This is what constructs suffering. So paradoxically, again, if we want to end our suffering physically, psychologically, emotionally, we actually just have to let it be here. Because through acceptance and openness, these experiences don't hit anything. And what is suffering but a message to show where we are tight, contracted, locked up, where there's something still to resist, something solid, something unchangeable. And interestingly, Thich Nhat Hanh, renowned Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who just passed away a few years ago, Vietnamese Mahayana teacher, he actually added a fourth mark of existence to suffering, impermanence, and no self. And he added nirvana. He actually said, no matter what we do, we can't escape from the fact that this is nirvana right here and right now. And yes, there is suffering. Yes, everything's impermanent. Yes, there is actually no solid self. And this is nirvana. And for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, for a very, understandable reason, it's very difficult to see that sometimes. Because we resist so much and amplify so much suffering. We're like, there's no way this is nirvana. Little did we know, our minds are constructing that. Not just at the level of thought, not just the surface mind, deep mind that we are deeply unaware of, are just innate responses. When something hurts, I resist. Naturally. There's nothing wrong with that intrinsically. It's just seeing it and recognizing how the mind is constructing experience right here and right now. How the mind is constructing suffering, constructing pain. We have control and agency in these experiences when we realize this. If it's still, if we're not aware that the mind is constructing these experiences, we think, oh, this is just happening to me, then we actually don't have that agency and control. That's why I'm making this video, because something magical happens when you realize, oh, I'm an integral role in all of my suffering at a very direct level. My resistance is building, fabricating, constructing the experience of said suffering. When I let life be as it is, let people come and go, let good feelings come and go, let good thoughts come and go, let this body come and go, just let it be. Let whatever comes, comes. Let whatever happens, happen. That ends suffering to varying degrees. And I won't say there's anything wrong with suffering. I think it's a part of the poetic beauty of life, actually. There's a beauty in the pain and the agony and the torment. There really is. But I want to serve as somebody that's like an outstretched hand. Because I've been in deep depression, deep anxiety. I've been in deep dukkha. And I wish someone was had their hand out to help me then. So this video is for those who are sick of this shit, sick of feeling trapped in suffering, in dukkha, in samsara, realizing there is a way out, and there really is, and we can tap into that relatively quickly. I don't like when people in the Buddhist circles think it takes lifetimes, and hey, it might, but not necessarily. If you're driven, determined, at least a little bit sharp, can pay attention to your experience, self-aware, you can do this in your lifetime today. You can do this in a few years, and this insight will deepen and ripen over time. Maybe you resonate with what I'm saying already. Amazing. And this is the beginning. If there's that resonance and there's a fire that's been lit, just apply this to your life. When there's pain, when there's dukkha, what am I resisting? Asking that question. And is it okay? Can I open to this? Pain, trauma, psychological, emotional pain. And just seeing what happens when we open. Magic happens in my own personal experience. And again, so paradoxical and counterintuitive. We think, oh, if I want to end my suffering, I need to avoid pain. I need to avoid discomfort. It's kind of wrapped up in this hedonistic mentality or this kind of modern woke kind of view that is, let's bubble wrap the world to end our suffering. Um, Good luck. Life will hurt. There's pain involved. It's how we grow. It's how we learn. That's how, actually, we find the end of suffering. It's by really being in it. There's something beautiful in that, too. So again, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I want to highlight this again. So when we resist life, it resists us back. When I resist feeling lack, feeling small, feeling like I'm not enough, this isn't okay that I don't feel like I'm enough. I'm amplifying that experience, and life is going to resist me back. So I'm like, oh, fuck it. Sometimes I just don't feel like I'm enough. Sometimes I just feel like I'm lacking, that everyone's better than me. Interesting. In that openness, things start to move. It's not as solid of a self, actually, to hit. And these feelings can move through much more easily, in a much cleaner kind of way. So again, yeah, paradoxically, if I want to end my suffering, my dissatisfaction, my dukkha, I have to allow it. I have to allow it to be here. Recognizing that it is a mark of existence. It's a fact of life. There is suffering. There is this pain. Again, physical, mental, emotional, all of it. Suffering exists. No matter how much we try to bubble wrap the world, keep ourselves from experiencing this discomfort, it will come. It has to come. And when we realize this, when it shows up, it's like, oh, there it is. There it is. It's not like I expected my life to be anything else. Again, this hedonistic mentality conditions us to think, oh, when suffering arises, there's something wrong here. And maybe at one at one level, sure, listen to that. We don't want to just live in suffering necessarily, I mean, unless it's your path. But at another level, it's absolutely inescapable. Everybody, every being will experience suffering. It's part of the beauty of duality. And me personally, I wouldn't have it any other way at this point. And again, the freedom comes from recognizing how this experience of suffering is constructed. It's not just given to you. I mean, that's a certain view to hold, but we give away our power when we hold that view. If we want to regain our power, recognize that we have a role to play in the construction formation of our experience of suffering, then we need to take ownership and see how I am, again, aiding the experience of suffering, which is through my resistance to experience. And again, this is practice and it builds like a muscle just of noticing suffering, asking the question, where am I resisting? And learning how to open. And it's not something I can tell you and you just know. It's like a somatic, like a whole being release. It's hard to even put words to it. It's just like an opening. And when we do this, feelings, including depression and anxiety, can move much more freely. Um, Pain, physical pain, when we go into it, is very different. Imagine running up a mountain. I love to exercise, so physical pain relating to exercise. When I choose to do it, when I'm open to running up a mountain, that experience will be very different than if I'm being forced to run up a mountain, either by myself or somebody else. Again, a very different experience when I'm open to versus when I'm resisting it. Or like little kids or grown adults when they're complaining the whole time about, I don't want to, why are we hiking so far? I don't want to do this. Why is my boss such a dick? In that resistance, we are amplifying suffering. I hate my job, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, sure, but just notice we are amplifying our experience of suffering when we are complaining like that through our resistance. Just again, noticing. And you don't have to do any certain thing. You don't have to, stop complaining. Just notice it and just feel into, what do I want to do right now? Do I legit want to keep complaining and make my life legitimately harder experientially, or open to it? Get that kind of David Goggins mindset where it's like, fuck it. I'm here to push myself. I'm here for the pain because that's where it's at in a sense. That's where I grow. I'm here to work that whatever 14-hour day, double shift, whatever it is. Um, Again, so just in summary, samsara, the cyclical wheel of suffering, and nirvana, the end of suffering, are actually one thing. And the three marks of existence being suffering, impermanence, and no self. These are parts of existence. There's nothing we can do to stop them. And in realizing that suffering is absolutely inescapable, we open, we surrender, we release, and we let go of any expectation to avoid suffering. We just let it be here. It's like a part of life, actually, part of the beauty of life, too, when we really open to it. Because it is beautiful, and it's a unique flavor of beauty that we can only access through suffering, through dukkha, in my experience. Again, so recognizing there's no way to end suffering, we surrender to it. And interestingly, when we surrender, we lower our resistance to it. And when we lower resistance to it, the whole experience of suffering fades. Because remember what Shinzen Young said, suffering is equivalent to pain multiplied by resistance. Again, suffering is equivalent to pain multiplied by resistance. So when we lower our resistance, the pain might stay the same. But when we lower our resistance, suffering is also lowered. And it can get lowered to degrees where it completely disappears experientially. Again, this might sound very foreign when we're used to living in a very, I guess, solid world. Not seeing it as something that's actually very fluid and that we are actively constructing moment by moment. So, when we surrender to life and its pain and suffering, we actually lower it. Again, paradoxical, counterintuitive. Who would have thought? Buddha, actually, is who would have thought. But again, I like the analogy. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when we resist life, it resists us back. And when we don't resist life, it doesn't resist us back. There's nothing to hit when we're open, transparent, in a sense. So, yeah. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it's saved. Some of my videos have not saved. If you have any questions, comment or DM me on Instagram at duffdaddy100. Thank you so much for listening. This means a lot to me. This is, yeah, my passion, and it's so fulfilling for me. So, yeah, thank you.